that the US will be in a situation where it may not have enough cash to cover everything. Now, in fact, this debt ceiling, the borrowing limit we've been talking about, the US has been bumping up against it, $16.7 trillion since May, but they've been using special ways, emergency measures they're called, to manage their funds, for example, not always investing in pension funds, that kind of thing. But that will start to run out on Thursday. Things will get more difficult. And the big worry, of course, for everybody is, will the US then be in a situation where it could default on some of its debt?
So how are the markets reacting at the moment to all this?
Well, we can take a look at what's been happening at the European Open. Markets just opening, and they've all been sliding in London. Paris and Frankfurt, as you can see, they're all falling back. In Asia, it's well, we had a mixed trading day, and in fact, some of the markets there closed for public holidays. Just China, South Korea open. They went in slightly different directions. But to talk about the reaction in the markets and from investors, let's talk to Joshua Raymond, who's the chief market strategist at City Index in London, to get a bit more on this. Thanks very much for joining us, Josh. Why is it, first of all, that the investors are so worried about what's going on in the US?
Well, if you've got the biggest economy in the world unable to pay its bills, that's a pretty significant scenario that would shatter market confidence. And so that's why this is a really big situation that all investors are looking towards for guidance in terms of where they're going to put their portfolios going forward, certainly in the near term and the medium term. The one thing I would say right now is we haven't necessarily seen equity markets react with any sort of vigour just yet, but most of the reason behind that is because this is not the first time the US has been in a situation where it has to raise its borrowing levels, for instance, and talks have always tend to go down to the wire. We've got 3 days, of course, till October the 17th. So as the days go on, of course, the market will become much more nervous. But right now, I think investors are kind of sitting on their hands and just watching to see which way this plays out.
You say they're much more nervous. I mean, how do you think things will actually play out over the next few days, assuming we don't get a deal right up to the last minute?
Well, the next couple of days, certainly, I think you'll start to see more risk aversion if there is no deal. We've already started to see some asset classes already moving, like 1 month Treasury yields have already escalated significantly. We've already seen some deterioration in the CDS markets, the credit default swaps, which is basically where investors go to take insurance out against a potential default. So you've already started to see those asset classes start to move. Equity markets, a little bit less so, but I would expect you might see a bit more aversion from risk as the days go on and towards the 17th deadline.
Joshua, good to get your views. Joshua Raymond from City Index. I'm sure we'll be talking to you again here on France 24. Thanks very much, Joshua. Now we're going to turn to French business now. The president there hoping he can drum up some more deals in his visit to South Africa. He's already arrived there, hasn't he?
Yes, he's already arrived, and he's got 40 business leaders with him. As we always see on these trips, it's a bit about diplomacy, but it's also quite a bit about trade and helping French businesses to do companies. Now, travelling with the French president on this trip, we've got the heads of EADS, that's the group that owns Airbus, for example, Arriva, the big nuclear company, EDF, the electricity company as well. And in fact, it's in the transport and energy sectors that they are hoping they're going to either get some deals signed during this visit or at least lay the groundwork for that later on. And France really hoping as well that it can start to boost its exports to South Africa. Currently, in terms of European countries, it's number 4 in terms of the amount of exports that it sends to South Africa. Of course, its relations with South Africa not as strong as in some other parts of Africa, but it does enjoy a pretty good trade balance. It exports about 3 times as much as it imports from South Africa.
So what's in it for the South Africans then? Because they've got some significant issues themselves, haven't they?
That's right. I mean, remember, South Africa is one of the BRICS, you know, these countries, these fast emerging growing countries. But there are some significant problems in South Africa, and one of those is unemployment. The rate is 26%, so 1 in 4 people out of work. And look at that figure for under 25s. It's 1 in 2. And what they need, of course, is lots of growth to get the economy moving to try to bring down that number. Now, these growth figures look pretty good in a European context, 2% this year, 2.9% for 2014, says the IMF. But it's not as good as we're seeing in other countries like Nigeria, for example, and it's not as good as it could be. The IMF saying South Africa really needs more certainty. We've seen too many of these kind of industrial disputes in the car sector, in the mining sector. that causes lots of uncertainty with businesses as well. And they also need to improve their transport infrastructure, says the IMF. So plenty for them to do. And they'll also be looking to build ties with countries like France.
OK, we'll continue, of course, to follow François Hollande's visit there. Now, 2 French economists could be in the running when we hear who has won the Nobel Prize for economics later today.
Yes, now it's always very difficult to predict any of these Nobel Prizes. They always seem to be a big surprise. But we thought we'd have a look at who might be in the front running, at least from France. Now, one of them is this man. He's called Jean Tirole, and he's a professor at the Toulouse School of Economics. Now, his speciality is regulation, and that is a hot topic in the world of economics because after the financial crisis, it's all about regulating banks, regulating industries, and that kind of thing. So he's done a lot of work. Many think that he could be up there in the running. Another one is Esther Duflo. She's a relatively young, early 40s economist. She's based at the Massachusetts Institute of Technology. This was her being interviewed a while ago on France 24. Now, she specialises in poverty in developing countries as well. And she's received lots of accolades for her work. She's seen as a bit of an outsider. And also, unfortunately for her, being a woman might not play in her favour because, in fact, in the 44 years of the Nobel Prize, just one woman has won the prize. So unless they are thinking they are going to change their tune on that. But she's a very talented economist and many people thinking that she could be in the running for this prize.
Perhaps they will change their minds. Quite right too. All right, Matthew. Thanks very much, Matthew Warren with Business here on France 24. Now it's time for today's international papers.